The hall had been designed by a committee, which meant it was enormous, circular, and aggressively symbolic. Floating light panels drifted overhead like obedient moons, shifting color to match the emotional temperature of the room, or so the designers claimed. At the moment, they glowed a diplomatic blue that suggested calm, trust, and absolutely no one telling the full truth. Cameron stepped through the threshold with the rest of the security rotation, his pace measured, his posture forgettable. Forgettable was survival. His new identification chimed softly in his inner ear, confirming biometric alignment. The name attached to it still felt like a borrowed coat, slightly stiff at the shoulders. He had worn it for years, long enough that it almost answered when spoken, yet it never quite felt like his. He scanned the hall out of habit rather than necessity, noting exits, sightlines, the subtle hum of anti-ballistic fields stitched invisibly into the air. Diplomacy in his experience was just warfare that had learned to smile. He expected the usual evening, posturing dignitaries, recycled jokes translated too literally, and the faint disappointment of realizing that the food synthesized to please 12 species pleased none of them particularly well. What he did not expect was for time to stop. Princess Elara stood near the central dais, framed by a cascade of slow-moving holograms depicting star systems Cameron knew were inaccurate by several parsecs. Her long ears swept back along her hair, elegant and unmistakable, a detail no disguise could ever erase from memory. She leaned toward him as he passed, close enough that protocol alarms should have screamed but didn't, because the universe enjoyed irony. "We thought we lost you in that battle," she whispered. The words were quiet. The impact was not. Cameron's body reacted before his mind did, every survival reflex screaming at once. His pulse spiked, his muscles tightened, and for one deeply inconvenient second he forgot which face he was wearing. Years of training prevented him from freezing completely, though the result was less heroic and more like a man who had briefly misplaced gravity. He recovered just in time to avoid walking into a decorative energy column, which would have been an undignified way to be remembered twice. He kept moving because stopping would have been worse. Stopping would have been an answer. Inside chaos. Of all the places in the known systems, of all the days, of all the improbable alignments of mass and bad luck, here she was, Elara, alive, older, carrying herself with the quiet authority of someone who had buried a brother and learned how to rule around the absence. And she had recognized him, not as an operative, not as a function, as him. He told himself to breathe. The anti-anxiety subroutine embedded in his neural implant offered assistance. He declined it out of spite. If he was going to unravel, he preferred to do it organically. The battle surfaced in pieces he had spent years trying to misfile, the crack of hull plating giving way, orders shouted over failing comms. Elara's brother standing his ground far longer than tactically sensible, because some people mistook courage for invincibility. Cameron had been there to protect, not to decide. That distinction had not survived the aftermath. Extraction had come violently, against his protests, a claw of light ripping him away while the rest of the world burned. He had been declared dead before he reached medical. Efficient, clean, necessary, they said. He had known too much, seen decisions that would destabilize treaties if spoken aloud. So he vanished and the galaxy adjusted. Apparently not everyone adjusted equally. A server drone drifted too close, offering a tray of drinks that shimmered through several states of matter. Cameron took one without tasting it and nearly laughed when the liquid rearranged itself into something vaguely citrus, out of spite. Even the refreshments were judgmental. He felt her gaze on him again, steady, disbelieving, not accusing. That somehow was worse. Around them the reception continued, oblivious. An ambassador laughed too loudly at a joke delivered by a translation unit that had misunderstood sarcasm as a threat. Somewhere a string ensemble tuned instruments that had never encountered strings. The light panels overhead warmed a fraction, responding to emotional spikes Cameron was apparently causing all by himself. He wondered distantly if being officially dead exempted him from small talk. Elara did not approach again. She did not need to. The whisper had already done its work, cracking open a sealed compartment in time Cameron had sworn never to revisit. Relief and confusion radiated from her in equal measure, and beneath it, something dangerously close to hope. Cameron focused on the present, on the absurdity of standing in a hall that could withstand orbital bombardment while being undone by a sentence spoken barely above a breath. He almost smiled at the irony. Surviving a massacre had been easier than surviving being remembered. The night was young. The galaxy, as always, had terrible timing. Cameron spent the next 20 minutes doing what he did best, existing without existing. He drifted along the outer curve of the hall, nodding when nods were required, pausing when pauses were expected, and keeping his hands visible in a way that suggested harmless professionalism rather than the fact that every muscle was coiled like a spring that had just remembered why it was invented. Elara did not look at him again. That was almost worse. Recognition had been a lightning strike. Restraint was the slow burn afterward. He could feel the space where her attention should have been, a quiet pressure between his shoulder blades, as if gravity itself was mildly disappointed in him. A junior attaché attempted conversation, asking whether Cameron thought the neutral systems would finally ratify the transit accords. Cameron replied with a perfectly safe sentence containing absolutely no opinion. The attaché looked relieved, as if spared from the danger of sincerity. Diplomacy, Cameron reflected, was mostly people thanking each other for not saying what they meant. His implant chimed softly. A background scan flagged elevated emotional variance within a 3-meter radius. Cameron snorted under his breath. He didn't need a machine to tell him that. He considered disabling the alert, then thought better of it. If his own technology was concerned, that meant he was officially being dramatic. The memory he had been trying to outrun caught up anyway. The battle returned in sharper focus this time. Not the fire and noise, but the absurd details no one bothered to archive. The way the tactical display froze for half a second before updating, like it was thinking about lying. The way Elara's brother joked over the comms that if they survived, he was demanding a promotion and a quieter death next time. The way Cameron had replied that quieter deaths were a myth invented by people who didn't read casualty reports. He remembered thinking briefly that they might actually make it. A passing drone clipped his elbow and apologized in 3 languages, one of which had no word for forgiveness, only adjustment. Cameron muttered that it was fine, even though it absolutely was not. He realized he was gripping his glass hard enough that the liquid inside had flattened itself defensively. Across the hall, Elara finally moved. Not toward him, but away, gliding into a cluster of delegates who parted instinctively. Authority, Cameron noted, aged better than grief. Her long ears shifted subtly as she listened, expressions controlled, posture flawless. He recognized the stance immediately. It was the one she used when absorbing bad news without letting it draw blood in public. He wondered, with a twist of something dangerously close to guilt, how many nights she had spent replaying that battle the way he had. How many versions she had invented where he lived or died differently. How many explanations she had settled for because the truth never arrived. Cameron took a breath and reminded himself why he was here. Not for closure, not for redemption. He was here because a rotating security detail needed an extra body with a forgettable face and a talent for not being noticed. The fact that the galaxy had decided to test that talent immediately was, frankly, rude. A security ping flared in his vision. Minor anomaly. Someone was querying old casualty lists tied to the battle. That was not coincidence. That was Elara being who she was. Cameron almost smiled. Of course, she wouldn't let it go. She never had. He ducked into a service corridor under the pretense of checking a sensor relay, earning a bored glance from a supervisor who had already decided Cameron was not interesting enough to worry about. The corridor hummed with infrastructure, cooling lines, gravitic stabilizers, the faint vibration of a station that pretended not to drift. He leaned against the wall and let the tension leak out of him in increments small enough not to be noticed by his own body. His implant offered the anti-anxiety routine again. This time he accepted. The wave of calm was artificial and faintly smug. "Great," he muttered. "Now even my nervous system is patronizing me." Footsteps approached, light and measured. Cameron straightened automatically, hand drifting just enough to be suspicious. Then Elara stepped into the corridor, flanked by exactly no one, her expression unreadable, and her ears angled forward with intent. "So," she said, her voice steady and very real, "you're either a ghost, a traitor, or the universe's worst practical joke." Cameron exhaled. "I was hoping for misunderstanding, but I see you've done the math." For a heartbeat, she stared at him. Then absurdly, she laughed. It was short and sharp and carried just enough disbelief to keep it from breaking apart. "You look terrible for a dead man," she said. "Occupational hazard," he replied. "Death has terrible skin care." The tension shifted, not gone but bent. Cameron knew better than to mistake humor for safety, but it was a foothold, and he took it. He met her eyes, saw the questions lined up behind them, and wondered how many truths he could afford tonight. The hall continued celebrating behind them, oblivious. Cameron thought, not for the first time, that surviving had been the easy part. Elara studied him the way she once studied star charts, not looking for beauty, but for inconsistencies. Cameron felt it immediately, the old instinct that told him when a commander was deciding whether you were an asset or a liability. He resisted the urge to straighten his posture. Dead men didn't need to impress anyone. "You vanished," she said at last. "No body, no signal, just absence." Her long ears angled slightly back. A gesture he remembered meant restraint rather than anger. "That is not how soldiers die." "Some of us are overachievers," Cameron said. "We disappear inefficiently." She did not smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched, betraying her. It was a small victory, but he took it. Humor, he had learned, was the only weapon that didn't leave a paper trail. "You were listed among the casualties," she continued. "Your name was etched. We mourned you." The word carried weight, gravity bending around it. "I mourned you." That landed harder than any accusation. Cameron leaned back against the corridor wall again, suddenly aware of how narrow the space felt. "They're very thorough when they want someone gone," he said carefully. "Forms were signed, databases updated, a whole bureaucratic funeral. I assume there was a speech." "Two," Elara said. "One of them very bad." He winced. "I apologize. In my defense, I was unconscious at the time." She folded her arms, eyes never leaving his face. "You were extracted." "Yes." "Against your will." "Yes." And then erased. That part, Cameron said, was more collaborative. Silence settled between them, thick but not hostile. Somewhere beyond the corridor, music swelled and faltered as an alien musician argued with a tuning algorithm. Cameron wondered if the galaxy ever paused for anyone who wasn't standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. "They said you died protecting my brother," Elara said. "They said you never retreated." Cameron closed his eyes briefly. "He told me to run," he said. "He was very insistent about it. I told him I'd see him on the other side. I was optimistic." Her breath caught just slightly. The long ears dipped, then steadied. "He was like that," she said. "Insistent, optimistic." She looked back up. "So why are you here?" The question was simple. The answer was not. "I saw things," Cameron said. "Orders that didn't match reports, technology that wasn't supposed to exist, decisions made because they were convenient, not because they were right." He shrugged. "Turns out that makes you a liability with legs." Elara exhaled slowly. "Witness protection," she said, tasting the words. "In a manner of speaking," he replied, "except instead of a quiet life on a forgotten moon, you get new names, new implants, and a standing reminder not to get attached to anything that might notice you're still alive." "That sounds exhausting." "It is," Cameron said. "The paperwork alone nearly killed me, ironically." She almost laughed again, then stopped herself, pressing two fingers briefly to her brow. "You let us believe you were dead." "I didn't have a choice." "You always had a choice." He met her gaze evenly. "Not if I wanted you to stay alive." That stopped her. Outside the corridor, a soft chime echoed, signaling a shift in the reception's agenda. Cameron's implant pulsed with a warning. Active scans. Someone was sweeping deeper now, cross-referencing biometrics with historical data. That meant time was thinning. "Elara," he said quietly, "if anyone else realizes who I am, this stops being a conversation and starts being a crisis." She tilted her head. "You think I don't know that?" I think, he said, that you're very good at pretending you don't. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint luminescent patterns along her pupils, a trait her people developed under artificial skies. You stayed away, she said, all these years. I was very far away, Cameron replied, also very busy being officially deceased. And yet here you are. He smiled, thin and tired. Turns out even ghosts get reassigned. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The corridor lights flickered as the station adjusted its orbit, a reminder that everything, even grief, existed in motion. Elara straightened, her expression settling into something composed and dangerous. You will stay invisible, she said. For now. I excel at that. And you will tell me everything, she added. Eventually. Cameron considered the galaxy, its lies, its impeccable timing. Then he nodded. Eventually, he agreed. They stepped back into the hall together, two figures carrying very different versions of the same past, while the universe pretended not to notice that one of its dead had decided to keep walking. They re-entered the hall with the practiced ease of people who had learned how to carry earthquakes behind polite expressions. Cameron adjusted his pace half a step behind Elara, not because protocol demanded it, but because old habits had an annoying way of resurfacing when they sensed familiarity. His implant immediately protested, flagging proximity alerts and predictive risk curves. He ignored them. If his own technology wanted him to panic, it would have to get in line. The hall had changed while they were gone. The light panels overhead shifted toward a warmer spectrum, as if the station itself had decided the evening needed optimism. Cameron suspected the algorithm had never met diplomats. A delegation from the outer trade systems clustered near a gravity sculpture that bent light into impossible angles, arguing cheerfully about tariffs that would never be enforced. Somewhere, a pair of translators argued with each other, each insisting the other was mistranslating a joke about reproduction cycles that should never have been told in mixed company. Elara moved through it all effortlessly, greeting, acknowledging, deflecting. Cameron watched her from the corner of his vision, noting how grief had not dulled her authority, but sharpened it. She no longer sought approval, she expected competence. That realization came with a strange, unwelcome swell of pride. A security officer intercepted them, smiling too broadly. Princess, a moment? Elara did not break stride. If this is about the seating protocol, I assure you I am already disappointed. The officer faltered, then laughed nervously. Cameron admired her efficiency. Fear, properly applied, saved time. They paused near the central holographic array, a slowly rotating map of known space that politely omitted contested regions. Cameron snorted quietly. Elara glanced at him. You find something amusing? She asked. I was just thinking, he said, that if you rotate it another 30 degrees, it lies even more convincingly. She huffed, a sound that might have been a laugh in another context. You always did have strong opinions about cartography. It's a moral issue, he replied. Maps decide who gets invaded. Her ears angled toward him briefly, a sign of private attention. You haven't changed as much as you think. That's disappointing, Cameron said. I was hoping for mysterious. They stood in silence for a few seconds, watching stars slide past that neither of them trusted. Cameron felt the scans intensify, the station's systems growing curious. Somewhere an AI was likely chewing on inconsistencies, comparing him to archived data with the patience of something that did not believe in coincidence. Elara, he said under his breath, we're running out of time. She nodded once imperceptibly. Then we'll have to use tradition, she said. He frowned. I don't like tradition. It usually involves standing very still while someone important judges you. This one involves privacy, she said, and a lie everyone agrees not to question. She raised her voice just enough to be overheard. I require the reflection chamber. A ripple moved through the hall. Several diplomats looked uncomfortable, one visibly relaxed, as if relieved it wasn't their turn. Cameron blinked. The reflection chamber? It is an old custom, Elara said smoothly, already walking. A space for contemplation before major negotiations. No surveillance, no interruptions. That sounds suspiciously convenient. It is, she said. That is why no one uses it anymore. Two attendants hurried ahead to clear the way. Cameron followed, resisting the urge to comment on how often ancient customs were rediscovered precisely when modern technology became inconvenient. The chamber was tucked behind a curved bulkhead, its entrance sealed by an organic interface that responded to Elara's presence with a soft, resonant tone. Inside, the air felt different, denser, charged with faint electromagnetic interference. Cameron's implant dimmed, system sliding into passive mode with a petulant warning he ignored. The room itself was simple, a circular space with smooth, dark walls that reflected not images, but impressions. Cameron felt his thoughts echo faintly, as if the room were politely listening. "Well," he said, "this is unsettling." "It is designed to encourage honesty," Elara replied. "Then we should leave immediately." She turned to him fully now, her composure finally cracking just enough to let exhaustion show. "Did you think I wouldn't come looking?" she asked. "That I would accept silence forever?" "I hoped," Cameron said carefully, "that you would survive." She laughed then, a real laugh, sharp with disbelief. "You think grief stops when survival begins?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I think," he said, "that I am very bad at explaining myself." "Yes," she agreed. "You always were." They stood facing each other, the room amplifying every unspoken word. Cameron felt the weight of years pressing in, all the moments he had rehearsed and abandoned. "I didn't abandon you," he said finally, "or him, or any of it." "I know," Elara said softly. "That's the problem." Outside, the reception continued, blissfully unaware that a ghost and a princess were renegotiating the past in a room that refused to forget. Cameron wondered, not for the first time, whether surviving had been a mistake. If it was far too late to undo it. The reflection chamber did not like secrets. Cameron felt it immediately, a low pressure behind the eyes as if the room were gently suggesting that lies were inefficient use of oxygen. He resisted the urge to glance around for hidden sensors, then remembered where he was and relaxed by a fraction. Old habits died harder than people, apparently. Elara moved first, circling the chamber with slow, deliberate steps. The walls responded with faint ripples of light, abstract and imprecise, like thoughts that refused to settle into language. "This place was built before neural encryption," she said, "before people learned how to hide from themselves." "That explains why no one invites me here," Cameron replied. "I make a living out of hiding from myself." She stopped and faced him. "You make a living out of not being noticed," she corrected. "There is a difference." He shrugged. "It's a subtle distinction. My accountant hates it." For a moment, the tension threatened to climb again, sharp and familiar. Cameron could feel the weight of what she still didn't know pressing against the silence. He also felt the faintest tremor through the station, docking clamps adjusting, mass redistributing. Somewhere a ship was arriving, and with it, more eyes. As if summoned by the thought, his implant pulsed weakly, limited but not blind. External anomaly clusters, pattern recognition running hot. Someone was curious, and curiosity at this level usually came with clearance. Cameron very much did not want to test. "Elara," he said, lowering his voice despite the chamber's shielding, "people are noticing inconsistencies. Not you, me." Her ears angled forward. "Then you are doing something wrong. That's comforting." She stepped closer. "When you disappeared, systems shifted, alliances hardened, enemies learned which lines could be crossed without consequence." Her voice remained calm, but the room responded with darker ripples. "Your absence had weight." Cameron exhaled slowly. "I was not aware I was load-bearing." She almost smiled at that, then sobered. "You saw something," she said. "Something that made powerful people decide you were easier to erase than to listen to." "Yes," Cameron said. "And if they realize I'm not erased, they'll want to finish the job. Politely, of course." "Of course," Elara echoed dryly. "Assassination is terribly gauche without a reason." He snorted despite himself. Humor slipped in sideways, the only way it ever did. "If it helps, I've already been assassinated once. It didn't take." The chamber hummed softly, reacting to the spike of shared emotion. Elara studied him again, but now there was calculation layered over recognition. Princess, diplomat, survivor. She was not just reacting anymore. She was planning. "You will not leave the station," she said. Cameron blinked. "That's not usually how witness protection works." "This is not witness protection," she replied. "This is damage control." He considered arguing, then thought better of it. "I feel I should point out that keeping me nearby increases your personal risk by a statistically alarming margin." "I am aware," she said. "I grew up with a brother who thought charging artillery was character building." That earned a real laugh from Cameron, low and surprised. "I liked him," he said. "He had terrible instincts." "Yes," Elara said softly. "He did." A faint chime echoed through the chamber, subtle but unmistakable. Elara's expression sharpened. "They're calling the chamber," she said. "That means someone important is nervous." "Should I start being worried?" "You should start being boring," she replied, "immediately." Cameron straightened, summoning every forgettable mannerism he had cultivated over years of strategic dullness. "I was born for this moment." They exited the chamber together, its surface sealing behind them, as if reluctantly letting them go. The hall greeted them with renewed noise and color, oblivious to how close it had come to becoming a crime scene. Almost immediately, a senior intelligence liaison approached, smile polished to a mirror finish. His eyes flicked to Cameron, paused a fraction too long. "Princess," the liaison said, "may I introduce—" "My attaché," Elara cut in smoothly. "He has a remarkable talent for standing quietly and agreeing with me." The liaison hesitated, then nodded. "An invaluable skill." "You have no idea," Cameron said. The liaison laughed, uncertain whether he was being insulted. He moved on, already distracted by another potential problem. Elara leaned closer. "You see?" she murmured. "Boring." "I feel underappreciated," Cameron replied. As the reception continued, Cameron noticed subtle shifts. Security drones repositioning, background scans tightening, conversations redirecting when he drew too near. The station was thinking, and thinking made it dangerous. Elara caught his glance and sighed. "You always did have a talent for upsetting systems. I prefer to think of it as revealing their flaws." "Then stop revealing them," she said, "at least for tonight." Cameron nodded, scanning the crowd one last time. Somewhere in the hall, something was wrong. He could feel it, a low hum beneath the noise. The galaxy was adjusting around him again. An adjustment, he had learned, always came at a cost. By the time the 6th hour of the reception cycle rolled over, the station's artificial night settled into a quieter rhythm. The light panels dimmed toward a muted silver, music softened into something almost contemplative, and conversations thinned into smaller, more dangerous clusters. This was the part of diplomacy Cameron trusted least. When people grew tired, they stopped pretending as carefully. Elara had maneuvered them onto a narrow balcony overlooking the inner void of the station, a vast open cylinder threaded with traffic lanes and drifting maintenance platforms. Ships slid past like slow thoughts, their hulls glowing faintly as they adjusted to local gravity gradients. Cameron rested his hands on the railing, partly to look casual, partly because it gave his body something to do, besides vibrate with awareness. "Your station has excellent views," he said. "It was meant to remind visitors how small they are," Elara replied, "and how expensive falling would be." "Effective," Cameron said. "I feel both humbled and financially threatened." She glanced at him, amusement flickering. "You always respond to danger with commentary." "It's either that or screaming," he said. "Commentary tests better." They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that wasn't empty but carefully holding its breath. Cameron felt the station's systems humming around them, layers of intelligence watching patterns form and dissolve. He knew those systems. He had helped design a few like them, back when his name still belonged to him. "Elara," he said quietly, "they're triangulating." Her ears angled back. "How long?" "Minutes," he said. "Possibly seconds if someone upstairs is having a productive evening." She exhaled, steady and controlled. "Then we talk now," she said. "Not later, not eventually." Cameron nodded. He had expected this. He had also dreaded it with professional thoroughness. "I didn't stay away because I forgot," he said, "or because I chose a quieter life. I stayed away because every system that erased me did so to protect a decision that couldn't survive scrutiny. If I came back, those decisions would come with consequences. And my people paid the price anyway, Elara said. Yes, Cameron said, which is why I never stopped feeling like a coward. She looked at him sharply. You think silence is cowardice? I think, he said, that hiding behind necessity is very comfortable. Her gaze softened, then hardened again, something reshaping itself behind her eyes. You think I don't understand necessity? She asked. I rule a fractured coalition held together by compromises everyone pretends are temporary. That sounds exhausting. It is, she said, but it is mine. A maintenance drone drifted too close, its sensors swiveling. Cameron waved it off with a casual flick of his fingers. The drone hesitated, then obeyed, evidently deciding Cameron was not worth an incident report. He took the small win gratefully. Elara, he said, if you push this, they will react. They already are, she replied. The difference is whether we control the narrative or become it. He laughed quietly. You've been practicing that line. For years, she admitted, usually in my head. It sounds better there. Cameron leaned back against the railing. You know what the most advanced piece of technology in this station is? He asked. She blinked. I suspect you're about to tell me. Denial, he said. Runs on everyone, consumes nothing, and crashes spectacularly. She shook her head, smiling despite herself. You are impossible. I've had professional training. The station lights flickered once, barely noticeable. Cameron's implant pulsed again, sharper this time. Lock-on queries, identity probability climbing. Someone had finally stopped being patient. They're close, he said. Elara straightened, every line of her posture aligning into command. Then listen carefully, she said. I cannot give you absolution. I cannot undo the years, but I can give you a place where your survival is not a crime. He studied her, really studied her, and saw not just the princess he had protected, but the leader she had become. You're offering me protection, he said, publicly. I am offering you purpose, she corrected, quietly. That's worse, Cameron said. Purpose has expectations. Yes, she said, it does. Another flicker, stronger this time. Somewhere deep in the station, an AI had reached a conclusion it did not like. Cameron felt the old instinct surge, the one that urged him to run, vanish, reset the board. He didn't. Instead, he smiled, small and crooked. You realize, he said, that keeping me around will complicate your life significantly. Elara met his gaze without hesitation. So will telling the truth. They stood there as the station adjusted around them, systems recalibrating, probabilities shifting. Cameron felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest, not relief, not fear, but alignment, like a vector finally pointing somewhere intentional. Well, he said, pushing off the railing, if I'm going to be a problem, I suppose I should be useful. Elara inclined her head. That is the spirit. Behind them, alarms did not sound. No doors slammed shut. The galaxy, for once, waited. Cameron had a feeling it wouldn't be patient for long. The station never announced its conclusions. It simply shifted, quietly and decisively, like a mind that had finished thinking. Traffic lanes adjusted, security patterns relaxed by a fraction too precise to be accidental. Somewhere deep in the station's layered intelligence, Cameron's probability curve stopped climbing and flattened into something tolerable. He felt it before he understood it. The pressure he'd carried for years, the constant readiness to vanish, eased just slightly. Enough to notice, enough to be dangerous. Elara, he said as they walked back into the thinning reception, either your systems are very polite or someone just decided not to kill me tonight. She glanced sideways at him. I would have informed you if it were the second. That's comforting, he said, in a deeply unsettling way. The remaining delegates were gathering their entourages, fatigue finally outweighing ambition. Deals had been hinted at, grudges postponed, lies exchanged with the promise of follow-up meetings. The galaxy, Cameron thought, ran less on truth than on scheduled dishonesty. A familiar presence slid into his peripheral vision. The senior intelligence liaison, no longer smiling. He approached alone this time, hands clasped behind his back, eyes sharp with a man who had lost an argument with an algorithm. Princess, the liaison said, inclining his head. A brief word. Elara stopped. Cameron did not. He remained half a step behind her, visible now, unhidden, a deliberate choice. He felt strangely lighter for it. The liaison's gaze flicked to him again, longer this time. There are discrepancies, he said, historical ones. Yes, Elara replied. History is full of them. We usually call them decisions. The liaison's jaw tightened. Some decisions require review. And some, Elara said evenly, have already been paid for. Silence stretched. Cameron waited, hands loose, posture relaxed. For once, he did not prepare an exit route. It felt irresponsible and wonderful. Finally, the liaison exhaled. The official record will remain unchanged, he said, for stability. Cameron smiled faintly. I do enjoy consistency. The liaison ignored him. Unofficially, he continued, certain advisory roles may benefit from individuals with unconventional experience. Elara nodded. I thought you might see it that way. The liaison stepped back, already disengaging. The matter, whatever it truly was, had been decided elsewhere. Cameron watched him go, feeling the strange finality of a door closing without slamming. Well, Cameron said, that went better than my last debriefing. Elara raised an eyebrow. What happened at your last debriefing? I died, he said. Very inconvenient. They moved toward the exit corridors together, no longer pretending coincidence. The station's night cycle deepened, artificial stars dimming as if tired of performing. Cameron felt the weight of years settle into memory rather than tension. Not gone, just filed. They stopped near a viewport, the vastness of space stretching beyond it, uncaring and magnificent. Elara rested her hands lightly on the railing, her long ears relaxed for the first time since he'd seen her. You stayed alive, she said, not accusing, not questioning, stating. Yes, Cameron said. And now? He considered the question. Once he would have answered with contingencies, escape plans, layers of caution. Now he surprised himself. Now, he said, I stop running from the fact that survival isn't neutral. It changes things. Elara nodded. It does. He looked at her then, really looked. At the lines time had added, at the strength grief had carved instead of hollowed. I can't give you back the years, he said, or him. I know, she replied. I can't even promise I'll be easy to work with. That, she said dryly, would be suspicious. A small smile passed between them, not romantic in its simplicity, but something deeper, earned. What will they call you? She asked. Officially, he shrugged. Probably nothing flattering. Unofficially? She turned to face him fully. Advisor, liaison, ghost, if you prefer something traditional? He chuckled. I was hoping to retire that. Then don't disappear again, she said softly. The station thrummed, steady and indifferent, as if approving by continuing to function. Cameron felt a quiet certainty settle in him, unfamiliar but welcome. He was no longer a problem to be erased, nor a relic to be mourned. He was something active again. Well, he said, pushing away from the railing, if I'm going to haunt the halls of power, I should probably learn where the good coffee is. Elara laughed, genuine and unguarded. You have learned nothing, she said. The good coffee is always classified. They walked on together, not into certainty, but into intention. Behind them, the galaxy adjusted once more, not to erase him, but to make room.